promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Banjul, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM worldwide at wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook at WADR. Here are the top stories. Guinea-Bissau opposition leader Pereira remains in detention as lawyers allege political persecution. The Open Society Foundation's OSIWA convenes a regional conference in Accra on money politics and democracy.
Consequences are profound. Too often, women, young people, rural communities, and citizens without powerful financial networks are pushed to the margins.
President Diomaye Faye appoints former Justice Minister Jan as president of Senegal's Constitutional Council.
A former Minister of Justice nominated can also add to that perception that the body is still a political body. It's still politicized.
And a fatal road traffic accident in Côte d'Ivoire claims 24 lives with many more injured. Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Abdullahi Hassan.
Welcome to our midday broadcast. We begin in Guinea-Bissau, where opposition leader Domingos Shemesh Pereira has been placed in provisional detention as part of an ongoing trial over allegations of his involvement in an attempted coup in October 2025. The leader of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, PAIGC, and the country's main opposition figure was detained following a decision by a military court after his recent court appearance. His lawyers have described the case as politically motivated, arguing that the proceedings are aimed at preventing him from taking part in the presidential election scheduled for December 2026. Veronica Njai tells us more.
Following a hearing last week in his trial over an alleged coup attempt, Domingos Pereira had been awaiting the military court's decision on whether he would remain free or be placed in provisional detention. The judge has now ordered his detention following a request from the public prosecutor. Prosecutors accused the PAIGC leader of participating in an attempted coup against former President Umaru Sissoco Embalo in October 2025, just weeks before he was eventually removed from power by the military. The prosecution alleges that Pereira helped finance the operation, providing tens of millions of CFA francs for logistics and hosted meetings linked to plans to overthrow the government at the time. The opposition leader was transferred under heavy police escort to the Segunda Esquadra prison in Bissau, where he is expected to remain throughout the duration of the trial, according to a judicial source. His legal team has rejected the accusation, describing the case as a political trial designed to block his participation in the upcoming presidential election. The December 6th election is expected to mark the end of Guinea-Bissau's military transition, which began in November 2025 after the military removed President Umaru Sissoco Embalo from power.
Veronica Njai filed that report. Meanwhile, across Africa, the rising influence of money in politics is casting a shadow over democracy, the focus of an ongoing regional conference in Accra, Ghana, organized by the Open Society Foundation, OSIWA. On the subject matter, critics warn that elections are increasingly being shaped by deep pockets rather than the will of the people, leaving leaders more answerable to powerful financiers than to the citizens who elect them. That concern was echoed by Binaifa Noroji, president of the Open Society Foundations, who in a video message at the conference called for stronger safeguards to protect democratic accountability.
For decades, the struggle to strengthen democracy across Africa focused on constitutions, on multi-party elections, and on expanding political space. And those achievements, of course, they matter. Today, we face a challenge that cuts across all of them: the growing influence of money in politics. Democracy rests on a simple promise that every citizen's voice matters. And yet, when money is hidden, unregulated, or concentrated in the hands of a few, that promise begins to erode. Political competition becomes less about ideas and public service, and more about access to financial resources. When that happens, accountability shifts. Across Africa, we've seen it. The cost of politics is rising everywhere. Evidence from countries such as Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, and Zimbabwe are showing that increasingly expensive campaigns are making political participation more difficult and strengthening the advantages of those who have influence and wealth. The consequences are profound. Too often, women, young people, rural communities, and citizens without powerful financial networks are pushed to the margins. Democracy becomes less inclusive, less competitive, and less trusted. So the task before us now is clear. We must move beyond diagnosing the problem towards building the institutions that can address it. That means meaningful disclosure of political funding, fair and transparent systems of public financing, strong oversight, independent enforcement, protection from illicit and foreign influence, and safeguards that enable civic oversight.
Binaifa Noroji, the president of the Open Society Foundations, OSIWA, speaking there. Here in Senegal, a new head of the Constitutional Council has been named at a time when the country's democratic institutions are facing close public scrutiny. Former Justice Minister Ousmane Dian's appointment by President Bassirou Diomaye Faye was announced Monday evening. He replaces the late Mamadou Bajo Camara. A respected legal practitioner with decades of experience in Senegal's justice system, Dian's appointment comes amid ongoing debate over judicial independence, institutional reforms, and the balance of power between President Faye's government and the ruling PASTEF party. But who is Ousmane Dian and what could his appointment mean for Senegal's fast-evolving political landscape? Augustine Kwale tells us.
Dian has served as Attorney General at the Dakar Court of Appeal and most recently as Minister of Justice. His legal credentials are unlikely to be questioned. What is likely to attract attention, however, is the political context in which he assumes office. As Justice Minister, Dian was often perceived as favoring a cautious institutional approach to judicial reforms. That sometimes contrasted with the faster pace of reforms advocated by former Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko and sections of the ruling PASTEF, which came to power promising a profound overhaul of Senegal's justice system after years of accusing the previous administration of politically motivated prosecutions. Ibrahima Khan, a governance expert, shares his reaction.
A former Minister of Justice nominated can also add to that perception that the body is still a political body. It's still politicized. And I think that is not really good for the state.
The Constitutional Council has gained unprecedented prominence in recent years. Its landmark rulings during the 2024 political crisis blocked attempts to postpone the presidential election and reaffirmed constitutional order. Just last week, it rejected a constitutional reform bill backed by the ruling PASTEF majority, citing procedural flaws. Another reminder that the Council is willing to challenge the government when it believes constitutional rules have not been followed. But critics argue that his previous role as Justice Minister under President Bassirou Diomaye Faye could fuel questions about the Council's neutrality, particularly at a time when political tensions within the ruling camp and broader debates over institutional balance remain unresolved.
Augustine Kwale reporting.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we stream live at wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook at WADR. 12 Burkinabe diplomats and consular officials have returned to Burkina Faso following the closure of the country's embassy in France. The diplomats were received in the capital Ouagadougou by Foreign Minister Karamako Jean-Marie Traoré, where they formally handed over the national flag and the keys of the embassy premises. It should be recalled that authorities in Burkina Faso had on June 27, 2026, announced the severance of relations with France for alleged support of subversive networks and terrorists, charges that Paris has previously denied. Let's now listen to Jean-Marie Bacon, the former acting Burkinabe ambassador to France.
We came to officially hand over the flag of Burkina Faso and the keys of the Burkina Faso embassy to the minister. Since June 26, 2026, the highest authorities of Burkina Faso took the wise and sovereign decision to break diplomatic relations between Burkina Faso and France. The consequences of that decision is that the embassy will be closed, the consulate will also be closed, and diplomatic staff must return to Burkina Faso. The entire process had to be completed within 1 week. This meant we had to move quickly, but we also had to ensure that everything was done properly. Within 1 week, we were able to conclude more than 60 years of diplomatic relations. Imagine everything that had to be done behind the scenes to achieve this. But we have returned successfully. And by returning successfully, I mean we left without leaving behind unanswered questions or concerns. You know that the Burkina Faso embassy in Paris, in addition to France, also covers 4 other countries: Spain, Portugal, Monaco, and Andorra. We had to reassure all these partners with whom we have good relations before our departure. We are proud to return to our beloved homeland with all the honors. We are proud to have carried out the sovereign decision taken by the highest authorities of Burkina Faso.
D'avoir mis en œuvre une décision souveraine de nos plus hautes autorités.
Jean-Marie Bakoun, the former acting Burkinabe ambassador to France. Staying in the Sahel, chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, has concluded his visit to Mali, where he held talks with the country's transitional authorities on the worsening security and humanitarian situation. However, with Mali still suspended from the EU following the 2020 military coup, questions remain over whether the organization's diplomacy is enough to address the realities on the ground. Emoredet has the rest of the details.
Although Mali remains suspended from the African Union following the 2020 military takeover, the Continental Organization continues to maintain dialogue with Bamako and provide support in addressing the country's security and humanitarian challenges. Through its mission for Mali and the Sahel, known as Miss Sahel, the African Union has maintained a diplomatic presence in the country, supporting political dialogue, monitoring developments, and coordinating with national, regional, and international actors. However, more than a decade after its creation in 2013, the mission's contribution to peace and stability in Mali remains the subject of debate. As the security situation continues to evolve, particularly in central Mali and other conflict-affected areas, analysts argue that the African Union's response needs to be adapted to address not only security challenges, but also humanitarian and development needs. Several regions continue to face displacement, limited access to basic services, and economic difficulties, factors that continue to undermine long-term stability. Beyond diplomatic engagement, calls are growing for stronger support to humanitarian programs, development initiatives, and peace-building efforts. The future role of Miss Sahel, including questions around its mandate, financing, and operational priorities, is expected to remain part of discussions within the African Union's decision-making structure. For now, the mission's main role remains focused on political representation, dialogue, crisis monitoring, institutional coordination, and support for peace initiatives.
A report by WADR's Aliou Cham in Bamako and presented by Imoredet. Away from the Sahel, health authorities in Liberia are warning that weaknesses in logistics, border infrastructure, and emergency response facilities could affect the country's ability to contain a possible Ebola outbreak. The warning follows a nationwide assessment which found that while Liberia's Ebola surveillance system remains functional years after the devastating 2014 outbreak, significant gaps persist in key areas of emergency preparedness. Authorities say Liberia currently has no confirmed Ebola cases, with nearly 1,000 travelers monitored without showing symptoms of the virus. However, they say further investment is needed to strengthen the country's readiness to respond to any future outbreak. From Monrovia, Abraham Parker reports.
Despite Liberia's continuing success in preventing new Ebola infections, health authorities say the country's preparedness systems still face important challenges that could slow down the response to a future outbreak. Acting Director General of the National Public Health Institute of Liberia, Dr. Siawata Kamana, said a recent nationwide assessment found weaknesses in logistics, border screening facilities, and holding areas for suspected cases.
The need to be more equipped and always ready to fight cannot be overemphasized. Our findings show that there are challenges with logistics, including mobility, and with rain gear, especially during the rainy season, as our surveillance officers strive to conduct outbreak investigations.
Dr. Kamana also provided an update on the Ebola monitoring efforts, saying 987 travelers, including Liberians and foreign nationals, were placed on observation after arriving to the Rabos International Airport. According to her, none of the travelers has shown any symptoms of Ebola virus disease.
Of the 987, 98%, comprising of 966, have completed the 21 days monitoring and follow-up. 2%, which is 21, remain under active monitoring. The assessment found that traveler screening continues at our designated points of entry.
The health officials say Liberia's surveillance network remains functional, supported by 98 district surveillance officers and 22 zonal surveillance officers. However, she stressed that addressing the identified gaps will be critical to ensuring that Liberia can quickly detect and contain any future Ebola outbreak. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal, online at wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook at WADR. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Guinea-Bissau opposition leader Pereira remains in detention as lawyers allege political persecution. The Open Society Foundation's OSF convenes a regional conference in Accra on money politics and democracy. President Diomaye Faye appoints former Justice Minister Jan as president of Senegal's Constitutional Council. Still ahead in the news, a fatal road traffic accident in Côte d'Ivoire claims 24 lives. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Bringing you the facts beyond the headlines from Monrovia, Liberia. This is Abraham Parker. Stay tuned to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
Many thanks for staying with us. Newslink continues, but this time in Côte d'Ivoire, where a devastating road accident has left at least 24 people dead and dozens more injured in the country's northwest. The crash involved a passenger bus traveling from Odiene, near the borders with Guinea and Mali, to Yamoussoukro. Authorities say investigation has been launched into one of the country's deadliest road accidents this year. Atiud Mbila completes the story.
At least 24 people have been killed and 36 others injured after a passenger bus veered off the road near the Bafing Bridge on the Touba-Biancouma Highway in northwestern Côte d'Ivoire. The bus was traveling from Odiene, the capital of the Kabadougou region, near the borders with Guinea and Mali, to Yamoussoukro when the accident occurred late Monday morning. 69 people, including the crew, were on board at the time of the crash. Rescue teams remain at the scene and are continuing search operations in the Bafing River for passengers still reported missing. Transport Minister Amadou Kone has expressed the government's condolences to the families of those killed and wished the injured a speedy recovery. He also ordered the immediate deployment of accident investigators and regional transport officials to determine the cause of the tragedy. Authorities say full administrative and technical investigation is underway. The accident comes as Côte d'Ivoire enters its rainy season, with officials urging motorists and transport operators to exercise greater caution and strictly observe road safety regulations.
Atiwin Mbila reporting. In news beyond West Africa, the International Rescue Committee warns that an intensifying El Niño weather pattern could trigger devastating floods, dangerous heat waves, and disease outbreaks across part of East Africa in the weeks ahead. Communities in Kenya, Uganda, and Somalia are expected to be among the hardest hit, with rising river levels, contaminated water sources, and an increased risk of cholera and other waterborne diseases. The IRC is urging governments and humanitarian partners to act now rather than wait for disasters to strike, stressing that early action saves both lives and resources.
This is the Newspaper Review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the Newspaper Review.
The Newspaper Review.
Well, let's take you back to Liberia, where WADR's Abraham Parker is standing by with a summary of what some of the local newspapers are reporting this Tuesday.
We begin with the Heritage newspaper. President Joseph Boakai orders Phoebe Hospital reopen, suspends senior management. That's according to the Heritage newspaper. Publisher Association of Liberia demands apology for Managing Director Mohammed Ali for denigrating the media. And court reserves ruling in U.S. $19.2 million cocaine case. Our next stop is the Analyst newspaper with volume 17, number 172, with these stories. Government of Liberia lacks will and credibility. Political leader of the Alternative National Congress says calls on international probe of 19.2 million seizure. Liberia studies Rwanda model. Office of War and Economic Crimes Court looks to Rwanda. Dedication studies genocide justice. And Commerce Minister woos Nigerian investors. Liberia pitches trade, tourism, and industrial opportunities. That's according to the Analyst newspaper. Our final stop is front page Africa newspaper with these stories. Cummings smells confusion into U.S. 19 million cocaine saga. Riley's calls for independent probe and international assistance. Seeking compensation. Suspended NOCA President Rostelin Swakoko Dennis seeks reinstatement. Back pay after court withholds dismissal of corruption case. That's according to front page Africa newspaper. Well, that does it for this edition of Press Review from Liberia's capital, Monrovia. Thanks so kindly for listening. It's back to you in studio.
Many thanks, Abraham Parker.
Politics,
Analyses on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest this afternoon is Ibrahim Khan, a governance expert who weighs in on the recent appointment of Senegal's former Justice Minister Ousmane Diagne as President of the Constitutional Council. Take a listen first to his reaction.
I think this appointment was even overdue because, it's more than a year that now the former president of the Constitutional Council passed away. So it is important for an institution like the Constitutional Court that we have the full capacity of this institution to perform, and particularly having a president that can really organize the functioning of the institution. So I think that the nomination is part of the recent pressure that we had from civil society organization and other people saying to the president that he needed to nominate finally the chairperson of that body, and it's now done, so it's fine.
Do you think his role as a previous Minister of Justice under the Diomaye presidency could affect public perception about the council's neutrality?
Diomaye came to power with the idea to transform the way of some institution, a very critical institution, will be playing in the functioning of the new state. And if I recall, during the first Assise Nationale de la Justice, it was clearly said in that document that we needed not only people who can really represent the independence of the institution, but also that the Constitutional Council, which was supposed to be transformed into a constitutional court, should be also an institution where you cannot only have judges, because this body is designed to deal with all the legal problem of the country. And when you look at the legal problem of the country, sometimes has a sociological basis, has an historical approach, as many other things. So the idea was to really make sure that the Constitutional Court is not only composed of judges or of lawyers in general, but yet, all the nominations that have been made recently since the new government came. It's again judges, former judges, all of these. So for me, that's something that we need to criticize. Now, the fact that a former Minister of Justice is now nominated as a judge of this important body can also add to that perception that the body is still a political body. It's still politicized. And I think that's also, in this particular context, is not really good for the state. So for me, maybe this nomination is just to fill the gap. But as we are in the process of having a constitutional court, we need to make sure that the next constitutional court is a body where the nomination process, the people, the profile of the people who should be there should be well known in advance. And I think that's where we can sort out the problem.
The voice of Ibrahim Hakan, a governance expert. In the sporting world, the fallout from Senegal's appointing campaign continues to dominate the headlines. At the news conference yesterday, President of the Senegalese Football Federation, Abdoulaye Fall, broke his silence, offering fresh insight into what possibly went wrong. From revelations about the national team coach to dressing room dynamics and the role of the team doctor, Fall addressed several issues that may have contributed to the Teranga Lions' early exit from the ongoing FIFA tournament. Well, my colleague Imori is in the studio with more details. Imo, good afternoon.
All right, thank you for having me. Well, the football president also painted a picture of a divided national team, as you've mentioned, alleging that the dressing room was fractured, the national technical director had been sidelined, and that several influential players exerted significant influence over the coach's decisions. He also made a remark which has drawn strong criticism from the Senegalese Association of Sports Medicine, which describes some of his statements as defamatory. Now, the association defended the team's long-serving physician, Dr. Fedjo, noting that he has been with the national team since 2017 and holds a specialist. He's a specialist degree, holds a specialist degree in sports medicine and sport biology from Sheikh Anta Diop University. And of course, we've also heard comment from the national team's captain, Koulibaly, who has expressed disappointment, asking, should we really embarrass ourselves like this on the world stage, Abdullah?
I mean, I really wish we had time for us to talk more on this. But of course, for those following, go to our social media pages. Yeah. Some of these reactions will be there for you to follow. And of course, after the conversation. But more, we do also know that the 2026 FIFA World Cup continues
Yes,
today.
The tournament continues today. And we will be having two sides meeting in Alton, Texas, with a place in Sunday's World Cup final, which is at stake. With semi-finals will start today, and both teams have impressed throughout the competition, combining attack and flair with the discipline defending to reach the last four. France and Spain, they're hoping to book their finals, and today's meeting promises to be one of the biggest fixture. Well, kickoff time is 7 p.m. local time here.
Very well. And one last question, Imo. This is the first time that the world is seeing these four teams all together meet at this level of the tournament.
Yes. Well, this is actually not the first time, though, but we've seen not the same team will get to the final, but we've seen this four in this situation before. Yes.
Very well. So this promises to be very exciting.
We look forward to it.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, Imo. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maojo Juf for the technical support. Stay connected via social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok at WADR, and stream live at WADR.org. Do join Alpha Boubacar at the top of the hour of 1 p.m. for the second edition of our comprehensive news packet in French. Info chez vous. I am Abdoulaye Hassan. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.